Dollars and cents. My name is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner and a certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning, where our team of certified financial fiduciaries stands ready this week to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan that produces superior investment results and provides you with peace of mind for the future. So what are some of those numbers that you need to know long term? That's one of the things that we're going to be talking about on the program today to really kind of gauge your financial security, plus some of the things that retirees should never do. But before we get to that, we wanted to take a moment and underscore a couple of things from the conversation we had on a prior episode about the Secure Act and the changes that it made to your retirement account, specifically from a beneficiary perspective. So the clarification actually comes to us courtesy of one of our YouTube subscribers, April, who asked the question about an existing inherited IRA, and just wanted to sort of clarify whether that new 10-year rule applied to her or not. And we love it when folks reach out to us on social media with questions about episodes, so you can certainly do that at any point in time. We always like to try and answer those questions on a subsequent show, because much like this question from April on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, this really is an important clarification. So there's actually two different clarifications that we want to make. One as a result of April's question, and then another one that we just want to emphasize again. So to April's question, what happened with the Secure Act is that as of January the 1st, 2020, if someone passes away after January the 1st, 2020, and you happen to be the one that inherits their retirement account, then your options for dealing with that money in that account, and most importantly in the eyes of the federal government, pay the taxes on that account, then you have to do that over a 10-year period of time. Previously, prior to January 1 of this year, 2020, you could spread that out over the course of the rest of your lifetime, meaning that you could take a little bit out, leave the rest continuing to grow on a tax-deferred basis. Obviously, that meant that you had an investment that was growing tax-deferred for a much longer period of time. So two exceptions, or I guess two clarifications on it. First and foremost, if you are the spouse, then you don't have to worry about these rules. If a spouse always can step into the shoes of their deceased spouse's account and basically treat it as their own. So you don't really have to worry about, as a spouse, oh my goodness, I've got to take all this money out over the course of the next 10 years. No, you don't, but you certainly want to take advantage of being able to assume it as your own in order to preserve that option. So that's clarification number one. Spouses, all of these stretch rules don't really apply. They didn't really apply beforehand either. They certainly don't apply now under the new rules. So in terms of if you were grandfathered, and that this goes directly to April's question, she inherited money from a parent, and ultimately that parent passed away prior to January 1 of this year. So if that's the case, then you're grandfathered in. If you're living under those old stretch rules, you can continue to live under those old stretch rules, because those are the rules that applied at the time that account was inherited. So a couple of different clarifications on that. Also, there's some different rules for if you're disabled, if you're a minor child. There's definitely some twists and turns if you are not just simply named as a beneficiary, but there's some medical or some disability or some age issues in there. So make sure you definitely kind of look through this a little bit in greater detail, because certainly the options have changed, and we want to make sure that you are aware of those options. But April, to your question on YouTube, if you got the account before January 1 of 2020, meaning that person passed away, then there's no need to have to accelerate. You're grandfathered in, so that's a good thing. And then number two, spouses, none of this really applies, because you always had the option, which still exists, to be able to take that account as your own. So certainly some good clarifications, and we appreciate April reaching out to us on our YouTube channel to ask those questions. So speaking of death, I saw a recent Gallup survey that kind of surprised me in terms of these numbers. 30% of Americans 65 and older do not have a will. A staggering 40% of those age 50 to 64 don't have a will. So today we thought we would give you some tips and things to think about when it comes to establishing a will. I guess it's particularly given that there's a pandemic going on, so we just don't know tomorrow. But we never know tomorrow, but I guess tomorrow looks a little bit more uncertain in the midst of a pandemic. So we wanted to give you some tips and some things to think about when it comes to a will, especially with those shocking statistics of just how many people don't have a will, even now in today's world. So, and I guess that's kind of the first comment, is that now more than ever, it is easier to do than ever before. The role of technology that exists is one that allows things to really be a little bit easier if you can sort of navigate through the tech side of things. And what I mean there is that there's an awful lot of online websites that, you go online and you put in your name and you number of kids and who do you want to be the executor and things like that, and you hit a button and poof, then you get your will. And many of those websites have numbers that you can call and talk to lawyers and things like that will allow you to generate out those documents. Those are super easy. So even if you don't want to do a lawyer, if you're sitting at home at night, and you're like, well, I guess I need a will, and 30 minutes later you'll have one. Go online, click a few buttons. Now, here's the caveat on all of that. Much like if you cut your finger, you would, medicate and put a Band-Aid on and things like that. But if you chopped your finger off, you probably want to go to a doctor. The same thing sort of applies when it comes to a will. If you've got a complicated situation, business interests, real estate interests, kids that are not exactly on the most straight and narrow path of life, in that case, you want to go see a professional. If things are simple, if you're just living it to your two kids and that's fine and everybody's happy, great, fine. You can do something easy like something online. But if it's more complicated, go see a professional. So easier than ever before, but again, the caveat is if life's complicated, then go talk to somebody that is a professional. Another thing to consider is that a will is just not enough. And with that, we're going to take a break so that when we come back, we'll talk more about why a will is just not enough and the two most important documents you want to have besides the will. Coming up next here on Dollars and Cents. 30% of people over the age of 65 don't have a will. So on today's program, we're talking a little bit about some of the things that you need to be thinking about to make sure that you have in fact checked the box, so to speak, on that one. Before the break, we were talking about a couple of different things. Number one, it's easier than ever before to do a will, especially with technology today. You can go online and do one at your leisure. You don't even have to leave the house, and a lot of them will have 800 numbers that you can call and talk to a lawyer. Caveat, of course, on that one that we mentioned in the last segment is that if you have a more intricate situation, then I would suggest that you absolutely go see a professional. Go see a lawyer if your situation is a little bit more unique. Certainly important to go see a professional when you've got a situation that requires that. And then the second thing that we were on, that we talked a little bit about before we went to break, was that a will is only part of the equation. There's actually two additional documents that you need besides a will, and that is a healthcare surrogate and that is a power of attorney. So a healthcare surrogate basically gives somebody the ability to make decisions of a medical nature along the way. So that's kind of important, particularly if you're needing some medical attention or going in and getting a surgery or operation, things like that. Also, power of attorney is important as well, because that gives a person the ability to make decisions as it relates to sort of business affairs. So you got the healthcare surrogate, where you're giving somebody the ability to make decisions relating to health, hence the name healthcare surrogate. And then the other document, power of attorney, it gives that person the ability to kind of make all of those other types of decisions. So both of them are important. You also want to maybe throw a living will into the mix, if you will, in terms of the important documents. But fine to have a will, that's a good first step, but make sure you get the healthcare surrogate, power of attorney. If you want to throw a third one in there, it's a living will as well. So welcome to today's program, Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your money. Hard to believe that it is Thanksgiving coming up. My goodness, right around the corner. We happen to be Central Florida's longest running radio show, coming to you here every Sunday morning at 9 on both the News Radio Orlando network, along with 96.9 The Game, Monday night game for the Bucks, if you're paying attention to what's going on in the NFL. Also, one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web, with over 13,000, I think. We're over 13,000 now, downloads of our program. My name's Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning, where I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary. At Nelson Financial Planning, our team of certified financial fiduciaries stands ready this week to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan that provides you superior investment results and peace of mind for the future. So next up on this list of things to be thinking about, if you're in that category, which is shockingly large, of folks that don't have a will, is, and this one's maybe hard, and is this something that you put on the table for Thanksgiving? I don't know. The point would be is that you don't want to avoid the hard conversation. So maybe you don't have those at Thanksgiving. Maybe you wait until maybe the day after. But nobody gets out of here alive, and what's going to happen and where things go and who they go to, don't leave that to interpretation or chance, or worse, what the state says. Because if you die without a will, then your assets are going to get distributed based upon state law. So don't avoid the hard conversations. We know they're hard. The reality is that it's important to have them so you can make sure that things go according to what you would want. And speaking of that, speaking of state law, every state is different. So just be aware that if you don't have a will, some states say, okay, fine, it all goes to the spouse, okay, regardless. Other states will say it goes some to the spouse, some to the kids. So recognize that there's differences among the different states. Again, that's why it's important to have a will, so you don't have to go down that path of having the state basically set out your game plan for how your assets are going to be distributed. So of course, next up would be, you can do one at any time, right? We talked about doing it at 10 o'clock at night on your laptop, just using one of the online functions. You can do one anywhere, anytime. A hospital room would be not exactly the ideal location, but it can be done. Understand the difference between somebody that is sick versus somebody that is incompetent. If you're incompetent, meaning you're not able to make decisions, maybe you're gone into stages of Alzheimer's or what have you, you're not going to be able to have the capacity to sign a legal document. But if you're sick, cancer or something awful like that, then you can certainly do a document if you're sick. There's a difference between being sick versus incompetent or incapacitated. So, and then along those same lines of having the hard conversation, think it through in terms of the decision maker. I think oftentimes we see people having the oldest child be sort of the default decision maker in terms of the executor, or maybe they're the power of attorney or what have you. The problem is that may not be the best fit. Maybe they live in a different location. Maybe they don't really manage their finances particularly well. The reality is that don't just pigeonhole and say, okay, I'm going to just have my oldest be the one to be the decision maker. The reality is don't be afraid to sort of shift things up or even divide things up, or have shared responsibilities, or consider the geographic location. So a few more items to be thinking about in terms of a will. We'll roll through them real quick. If you're married, each of you must have one. The notion of joint wills, that's a terrible idea. Some states don't even recognize them. The other part, sort of this is an offshoot of having the hard conversation. You either treat everybody the same or be prepared to have the hard conversation now, because that lingering after death, and we've seen that happen more than once in our 20 years of helping clients navigate through these difficult decisions. If you wait and you're gone, then it's left to interpretation as to why things were not equal. So have those hard conversations. And the reality is it's not one and done, right? If you create a will, it's important to go back, regularly review it. Life events will change things. You may move to a different state. Some people may die, those kinds of things. So it's not just, I did it and I'm done. It's important to kind of go back and review it as well going forward. So anyway, while we're on the kind of topic of death, not to kind of put a black cloud over the show to talk this much about death, but these are certainly important things to be thinking about, whether it's wills or whether it's debt. And one of the things that people sort of forget is that debt can also be pretty damaging, and most folks don't realize what happens to their debt when they die. And there's an old expression, death and taxes, you're not going to be able to avoid them. The reality is, depending on the type of liability, you might very well have that continue on after you are passing. So that's going to stay with the beneficiary. So make sure you sort of understand, which things are going to stay with the particular asset or investment, and which things are in fact unsecured and ultimately won't be an issue, but they'll still be an issue on your estate, because that's where credit cards and things like that would come into play to try and get some money from your estate. So I think it breaks down into making sure that you look at who's responsible for the debt, if you will. So if somebody co-signs it, or somebody's a joint account holder, or if it's your spouse, or someone co-guaranteed it, or it's your personal representative going through the estate process, understand that all of those people may have some level of responsibility to be able to pay those debts. And in some states, spouses are required to deal with the debt of a spouse on any joint property. A co-signer alone obviously is going to be immediately responsible for that, and even an executor can be personally responsible as well. So what types of debt do you want to, or liability do you really want to be most concerned about? Well, first and foremost, hey, death and taxes, it's taxes, income taxes, estate taxes, things like that. The IRS is going to chase it, and can chase it throughout the rest of your time, or your beneficiary's time, if you will, going forward. So we're going to take a break. When we get back from the break, we're going to finish up this conversation in terms of what types of debt can in fact be inherited and be the responsibility of your beneficiaries. Coming up next here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris. We're talking about some of the things that you need to be aware of after you're gone, right? And while it may not be self-evident, the reality is that some of the debt that you have can in fact continue on and be the obligations of any number of people once you pass. So you need to understand sort of who might be responsible for that debt, and what types of debt may in fact be applicable to having to get paid after you're gone. In the last segment, we were talking about the types of folks that may get pulled in to be responsible for your debt, whether that's a spouse or a joint account holder or a co-signer or a co-guarantor, or even the executor of your estate. Because remember, if there's bills out there, those folks that you owe the money to, their mechanism for collecting that, if you pass, is to sue the estate. And it's the responsibility of the executor to make sure that those all get handled. And in some cases, if they don't fulfill that responsibility, it can come back to them personally. So just be aware that depending upon who's out there after you pass, they may very well be responsible. In addition to that, just be aware that there are certainly some different debts that take sort of higher priority, if you will, in terms of your claim or their claim against you, and chief among them is the good old IRS. Those folks will chase down anybody for tax liability owed, executors, beneficiaries, spouses, whatever the case may be. So understand that just because you pass, you're not going to be able to avoid the tax liability that is going to be owed. And in a lot of cases, the same thing applies to medical bills, although generally medical bills are against the estate. Medicaid potentially can place a lien on certain assets that benefits get. So be aware that if you are on Medicaid and you pass, you need to make sure that your beneficiaries understand that there could be a lien on that as well. In the example of things that are secured, so like car loans, things like that, mortgage, all of those are secured by assets, right? Car loan secured by the car, mortgage secured by the house. And the reality is that the lender has the authority to retake the car or retake the house in those particular cases. About the only two that are sort of, you might be able to get fully away with that are really your traditional unsecured debt would be your credit cards and your student loans. Again, remember, unsecured debt can always put a claim against the estate to get paid if they don't get paid. They don't normally do that because that's a process, and most of the time estates aren't big enough to sort of cover that, but just be aware they certainly can do that. And so if you've got assets passing through probate, which would be the case if you don't have a will. And see, all of this conversation on today's program sort of ties in, if you will, to the concept of you've got to have that will, because if you don't have the will, then it goes through probate. If it goes through probate, then that means there's an estate. That means that some of these debts that generally might disappear after you pass would have a claim against that. So just make sure that you're aware that, hey, you know what, debt doesn't just disappear when you die. There's got to be a game plan for that, and be aware that there may be a number of folks who are held responsible for paying that debt if in fact it exists once you pass. So be aware of all of that. So welcome back, of course, to Dollars and Cents. We're Central Florida's longest running radio program here, coming to you on Sunday mornings on the News Radio Orlando Network, along with 96.9 The Game. My name, of course, Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning, where our team of certified financial fiduciaries stands ready this week to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan that provides you superior investment results along with peace of mind for the future. So coming up here in this rest of this segment, we're going to talk about some of the numbers that you need to know for true long-term security. It's important to have some yardstick, some baseline at any age to know where you are and whether you are on track financially. So whether you know you're in good shape or not, finances, of course, right, has everything to do with numbers. So let's spend some time kind of going through some key numbers during the rest of this segment so that you can perhaps maybe get some yardsticks to use to find out whether you are on track financially. And of course, first and foremost of those numbers is simply your monthly cash flow, right? So that's going to determine, your monthly cash flow is going to determine whether you are living above or below your means. Because simply what monthly cash flow is, it's money in versus money out. So income that I'm coming in from all sources, rental, work, retirement, Social Security, whatever the case may be, versus money going out, expenses of any kind, whether that's your mortgage, your car loan, your credit cards, all of that. Important to review those bank statements, those credit card statements, those checking account statements to get a handle on that money that is going out. So money in minus money out, that is your monthly cash flow. If it's a negative number, you got a problem, because that means you're spending more than what you're bringing in. That means you're not in good financial shape. If it's positive, that's good. How much of that positive number can you set aside for the future for retirement or for your emergency savings. So big number to know, what's my monthly cash flow? Number two, makes sense, credit score, right? Credit score, that determines how much you're gonna have to pay for borrowing costs. The higher the credit score, obviously, the lower your borrowing costs are going to be. But it can also, your credit score these days can also affect things like the cost of your car insurance, cost of your homeowner's insurance. In some cases, employer even pull credit to see what type of person you are. So be aware, credit score is certainly pretty important. Free copy of your credit score online, a bunch of different websites. I have it available to you free. And of course, it's a score, right? It's a number. FICO score generally ranges from 300 up to 850. Generally, if you're below 760, they've sort of shifted the numbers a little bit over the course of the past few years. If you're below 760, you probably want to look to improve that. 760 is not as good as it used to be under the old sort of scoring range. So if you're below 760, you certainly want to look to improve that. We did a podcast on this particular topic here a few weeks ago. So if you want to reference that, be sure and check out our social media channels for that. The reality is that the single biggest thing you can do to improve your credit score is pay bills on time. So make sure that you are paying your bills on time. That's the single biggest way to improve your credit score. There's also 4 other factors that go into the credit score. So make sure you check that out. If you want to know more about your credit score on one of our previous episodes on our YouTube, iTunes, Facebook, whatever, iTunes, I said that, Spotify, we're on all the channels. So just check us out under Nelson Financial Planning. So next number up that you want to do to kind of get a handle on in order to know what your, ultimately your sort of your financial future looks like, or what your state of your finances is a debt to income ratio. And that helps to determine just how leveraged or how much borrowed money you've got on yourself. And what also is important is, to the extent you're trying to borrow more money, maybe you're trying to get a mortgage or something like that, that's the single biggest factor that banks will look at. They want to make sure that, hey, you're bringing enough money to cover this payment without any problem. And so generally what they look at is for a number that's below 43%. So if you're bringing $1,000 or $10,000 a month in, they want to see that you are having a monthly debt service of less than $4,300. So that kind of gives you some numbers in which to work with. Lower the lower that ratio, the lower the debt to income ratio is, right? The better off you are. That means you've got less debt, more income. Obviously, that makes you a much better credit risk. It will reduce down your amount of borrowing costs that you would have to have. Next up, in terms of some of the numbers that you need to know in order to make sure you're on track financially, what's the highest interest rate on your debt? We're going to talk more about why that's important after the break here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris on News Radio WFLA Orlando. The program, we're talking about some of the things that you need to be aware of, some of the numbers in order to really gauge your financial security. In the last break, we talked about the first 3. Number 1, your monthly cash flow. Number 2, your credit score. Number 3, your debt to income ratio. In this segment, we're going to cover another 3. These are good numbers to know to give you a yardstick of where you are in terms of your financial security. So welcome to Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. We're Central Florida's longest running radio program, coming to you every Sunday morning at 9 on both the News Radio Orlando network along with 96.9 The Game. We also happen to be one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web. Thanks to the folks at FeedSpot putting us on that list here at the beginning of the year. Over 13,000 downloads of our podcast at last count. So that's good stuff. If you haven't found us on your favorite social media channel, we encourage you to do that and subscribe so that you know when we put up new episodes of the program on a regular basis, whether that's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, iTunes, Spotify, you name it, we're on it. Just check us out, Nelson Financial Planning or Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris. My name, of course, is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning, where our team of Certified Financial Fiduciary stands ready this week to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan that produces superior investment results and provides you with peace of mind for the future. So what are some of those other numbers that you need to know to really gauge your financial health? Well, number 4 is knowing what the highest interest rate is on your debt. Why is that important? Because that's causing you the most amount of pain. If the debt that you have, let's say you got 3 or 4 different debts out there, mortgage, car loan, credit card, student loans, whatever the case may be, the one that's charging you the most amount of interest is causing you the most amount of pain because it's costing you the most. So if you know which one has the highest interest rate, then you know sort of where to sort of concentrate on sending extra cash flow to ultimately pay that down faster than everything else. Most likely, or more likely than not, it's your credit cards, particularly any store credit cards you may have. Those are the ones that are sort of most egregious. Put your cash towards that one and you'll get in better financial shape sooner. Number 5 on this list is of things or numbers that you need to know, and this one is kind of a little tricky to figure out these days, but unfortunately it's becoming a more and more important number, and that is this notion of health care costs. It's the fastest growing part of your budget. It accounts for 16% of spending if you're over the age of 75. And it encapsulates a lot of different stuff. So when you stop and think about medical and what that involves totaling up not just sort of your medicine costs, also your insurance costs, your Medicare supplement costs, your out-of-pockets, your dental, your hearing, your vision. I mean, all of that stuff goes towards your healthcare costs. So know what your healthcare costs are, because the average person still, if they're on Medicare, still spends about $7,500 a year. So we raise that issue with healthcare costs, particularly right now, because most people are finding themselves in open enrollment, right? If you're working, chances are that this is the time of year where you are picking sort of the options within your employer-provided plans that are available to you. So make sure you sort of really understand what the costs are, and not just what the costs are, but what you're paying for and what you're getting, and really take a look at that. If you're on Medicare, it's open enrollment right up until December 7th. So it's important to sort of study the options in terms of what's out there in terms of supplements. If the supplements don't seem to work on a financial basis, because that combination of Part B and a supplement can be often relatively expensive, $300-400 a month, then ultimately you may want to look at Medicare Advantage options or similar options like that. So, but bottom line, so important to know about your health care costs. And then of course, can't forget this one, right? Your retirement savings. That's an important number certainly to know, because that's the supplement that you're going to be drawing off of to help supplement Social Security. On a previous episode, we described Social Security as a program that was described originally as a 3-legged stool where it would support retirees. The concept is one leg is Social Security, one leg is pension, one leg is your general retirement savings. Problem is that one of the legs has sort of gotten shaved off, and that's the pension leg, because not many employers, businesses, corporations offer pension these days, so forcing more emphasis on the retirement savings. And that's why knowing what that retirement savings number is so important, is because one of the legs of the stool, if you will, that was intended to be a 3-legged stool for retirement is sort of gotten sawed off. So the retirement savings number becomes much more important. You find it very simply by taking the grand total of any of your investments. So that's IRAs, that's 401ks, that's regular investment accounts. The simplistic way to sort of see what income or what amount of income you're going to get on that total number is simply take that total number and divide by 25. Handy rule of thumb, if you divide it by 25, it basically is the same thing as 4%. A lot of people don't like percentages, or kind of get twisted and turned around with 4%. And where's the decimal point go when you make that calculation? Easier way to do it, divide by 25. That'll tell you how much your annual income would be potentially off of that type of retirement. So that's certainly how you can kind of get a better handle on your finances. To recap, I think we actually hit 6 different things or 6 different numbers to be aware of in terms of using those as guideposts, not just if you are retired or close to retire, but really regardless of how old you are. So number 1, monthly cash flow. That's certainly important. Number 2, your credit score. Number 3, your debt to income ratio. Number 4, what's the highest interest rate on your debt? Number 5, what's your health care costs? And then, of course, your retirement savings. If you know those numbers, then you're going to be in better financial shape. So important to kind of know that information, to know where you've got to improve things. Speaking of improving things, we will start December 1 at the office with a new tradition. We're going to call it a new tradition because we are planning on doing it every year going forward. We decided to do a couple of different drives to help support the local community. We're doing a Toys for Tots food drive, Toys for Tots toy drive to support the folks at Toys for Tots, and then a food drive to support Second Harvest Food Bank. We're starting to collect donations on December the 1st, so we're excited about that. So if you're interested in donating to either of those food or toy drives, certainly swing by the office at any time to drop off unwrapped present or packaged food items, non-perishable on the food items. So anyway, we hope you have a great Thanksgiving, and ultimately might be able to sort of get together with the family. I'm not sure how that works, but hopefully so. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up and get on out of here. Thanks for listening in. This is Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris on News Radio WFLA Orlando.